Today I went over the fronts and I'm doing the rears now just because when I put my rear tires on I don't want to have to do the brakes. I just want to slap them on. So I'm doing the brakes beforehand before my lug nuts come in for my new tire combo. One thing I wanted to go over is that this inner pad comes with this two-piece shim, and this is typical on automotive cars, but they're only on the rear. They're not on the front. I looked up the parts list, and the diagrams don't show this piece on either the front or rear, or as a separate part. So if you're changing out your brakes for new pads, and you're buying aftermarket or OEM, keep these pieces. It could be anti-rattle, anti-squeak. The other thing is the rear pads. My rear pads have a lot more meat than the front, and I don't know if that's because of the proportioning valve they have between front and rear, where the front does more braking. That's typical in a car. When you brake in a car, you have more front braking than rear. And maybe Yamaha has implemented that on their side-by-side or the RMAX. But I've noticed that my rear pads have a lot more meat. Then again, the rear pads could have more meat brand new than the fronts. So who knows? One other thing I wanted to bring up is bleeding your sliders. What the hell is he talking about, bleeding your sliders? When you're greasing your sliders, in my previous video, I accidentally called the brake clips sliders. These are your sliders that the caliper rides in and out on. And when you're greasing these sliders, you want to get enough grease to where it lubricates, but you don't want to overpack it, and you want to get the air out of them. I purposely pulled these out and got some air in there. And you'll notice this bolt wants to come out. And when you're braking, the caliper goes this way. When relaxed, it's this way. But when you press on the pedal, it moves out. So when you're doing your brake service or inspecting them, you want to make sure you don't have any air in here, or that you don't have it over greased. So what I do is I'll break the lip away from, just pry back a little bit so air can escape. I'll compress this as much as possible, and then I'll let the lip return. And you can see now, this wants to return in the other direction. This bottom one has air in it, so it sticks out. This one, when I pull it out, it wants to return. In my previous video, you heard me talk about anti-drag clips. This isn't a replacement for anti-drag, but it'll help prevent your brakes from dragging. So this is a common problem with everyone. My brakes are only lasting 500 miles. So this is expanding on that. You want to make sure you get all the air out, and this is the only way this compresses the only reason why this can't compress any further is because of the rubber. So I'm going to do the same to this one. I'm going to just bring the seal back a little bit, push this in all the way, and let the seal return. And now this one too also returns. The other thing I noticed is this grease in the rear, it isn't as, it's still got some pliability to it, still got some viscosity, or I should say it's more viscous than the front, but it still slides. So we'll do a couple more 1,000 miles and see if this dries out completely or if it still maintains lubricity. Lubricity? Yeah, that sounds right. So you can see that the caliper is pretty much bottomed out. So that should prevent any drag that you would normally have if this wasn't bled of air and didn't, or if it was overpacked with grease. So the two takeaways from my long-winded spiel here is don't over-grease your calipers. Grease them sufficiently so that they slide, but don't overpack them to where this can't compress in and you're fighting hydraulic grease for the caliper to return. Eventually, as your pads wear, you'll lose that effect, but also purge the air so this can return when you let off the pedal. Okay, thanks.